So some very interesting news coming out of Major League Baseball on Tuesday. In a sweeping decision, Commissioner Rob Manfred said that 17 people had been reinstated that are currently deceased and had been deemed permanently ineligible for the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So under Rule 21 of the MLB's Code of Conduct, going forward, ineligibility will end once a person dies. So I think this is really a brilliant solution to this problem. When a player is banned from the sport for something that is widely accepted by the sport now, such as sports gambling, for instance, now is the opportunity that posthumously these people can be celebrated for their accomplishments on the field. Of course, the two most notable people on this list of 17, Shoeless Joe Jackson, that this video will talk about further. This is a re-release of the history of Shoeless Joe, as well as Pete Rose, who was one of my absolute all-time favorites. So I'm really excited about these two, but I also wanted to go into a little bit of detail on the other 15 names on this list. The next player on our list is another member of the disgraced 1919 White Sox, along with Shoeless Joe, Eddie Cicotte. Eddie, a native Michigander, won 208 games in his major league career. He confessed to participating in the scheme to fix the World Series, and despite being the first player to admit it, he later rescinded his confession before being acquitted. He was lit up in Game 1 of the World Series, allowing 6 runs in 3 innings, but he allowed only 1 run across his other 2 starts, and both of those were complete games. Impressively, over his 14-year MLB career, he carried an ERA of 2.38, making him one of the most dominant pitchers of all time. He had a WAR of over 57. He died at 84 years of age in 1969. Another band member of that infamous 1919 White Sox team was outfielder Happy Felsch. He publicly admitted taking $5,000, which was around $93,000 in today's money. He did this to help lose the World Series, in which he hit just a .92. During his 6-year professional career, he had a .293 batting average in 2,800 at-bats, hit 38 home runs with 443 RBIs. He died in 1964 at 74 years old. He was a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Chick Gandil was an imposing figure in Major League Baseball. And nearly 40 years after the Black Sox scandal, he admitted in a Sports Illustrated tell-all that he had organized the plan to fix the 1919 World Series. He was a first baseman, and he said he and Eddie Cicotte were the leaders of the plot. He had a .277 batting average with 11 home runs and 556 RBIs in his career, but hit just .233 in the World Series that year. Gandil died in 1970 at 82 years old in California. Fred McMullen was the backup third baseman for the 1919 White Sox. He only had 2 plate appearances in the series, but served as an advanced scout for the team. McMullen joined the fixing scheme after hearing teammates discussing the plan. He threatened to report him if they didn't cut him in. He played for 6 years, recording 234 hits and 914 at-bats, a single home run, and 72 RBIs. He died in 1952 at 61 years of age in Los Angeles, California. Swede Risberg. Swede had been a hero of the 1917 World Series win, but in 1919, he was one of the leaders of the scandal. Batting just .080, going 2 for 25 in the World Series, over his 4-year career, he batted .243. After his MLB career ended, he played a few years of semi-pro ball, and he died on his 81st birthday in 1975 in Red Bluff, California. Buck Weaver. Weaver did not participate in fixing the 1919 World Series, but he also didn't report it. Once he learned of his teammates' plan, he stayed quiet. He turned down money to play poorly, and he hit .324 in the series, but was banned anyway for not speaking up. Weaver recorded a .272 batting average over 4,800 at-bats, played for 9 years, and applied for reinstatement 6 times after his ban. None of those requests succeeded, and he died in 1956 at 65 years of age in Chicago, Illinois. Lefty Williams was a starting pitcher for the 1919 White Sox. He had a .391 ERA over his 7-year career with an 82-49 record in the majors. Williams lost all 3 of his starts in the World Series that year, a record that stood alone until George Frazier tied it in 1981. He played in barnstorming leagues after his ban from pro ball and died in 1959 at 66 years of age in California. Joe Gedden. While not a member of the White Sox team, Gedden was banned alongside the players accused of fixing the World Series that year. A friend of Swede Risberg, Gedden allegedly attended a meeting with some of the gamblers who funded the scheme. He originally did not report what he heard, but was banned after testifying in the trial. In a 7-year career with the Nationals, Yankees, Browns, he had a career average of .244 and just over 2,100 at-bats. He was 47 years old when he died in 1941 of cirrhosis of the liver. His nephew Elmer was one of only 2 Major League Baseball players to die in World War II in 1944. Like Gedden, Gene Paulette was not a part of the 1919 White Sox, but he was caught up in the scandal. He admitted to taking money from gamblers to lose games while playing for St. Louis in 1919. Paulette played for 6 seasons and recorded a .269 batting average across 1,700 at-bats. He died at 74 years old in 1966 in Little Rock, Arkansas. Benny Koff was the first player to be banned from baseball for a reason other than working with gamblers. He was accused of stealing a car, repainting it, and selling it with his brother in December of 1919. Though he denied the charges and a jury actually acquitted him, he received a lifetime ban from baseball. In 8 years and just over 3,000 at-bats, he recorded a .311 batting average and a .450 slugging percentage. Koff died in 1961 at 71 years of age in Columbus, Ohio. Lee McGee. The grand jury investigating the 1919 White Sox reviewed evidence that McGee fixed at least one game on August the 31st that season while playing for the Cubs. McGee denied the accusation, but the Cubs released him anyway. He had a .276 batting average over his 9 career, 3,700 at-bats, and he died in 1966 at the age of 76 in Columbus, Ohio. Phil Douglas in 1922 was playing for the New York Giants. He was suspended over a dispute with the team owner John McGraw. He had won a World Series with the team the year prior. But while suspended, he wrote a letter to a player on another team saying he would accept money to abandon the Giants so they would lose games. He was banned for life. He posted a .280 ERA over his 9-year career. He died in 1952 at 62 years of age in poverty in Tennessee. But now Phil gets a second chance. Jimmy O'Connell and Cozy Dolan. O'Connell was an outfielder for the New York Giants, and Dolan was the Giants' coach. They were banned for taking money from gamblers and attempting to fix games. In 1924, they allegedly offered Philadelphia Phillies shortstop Heine Sand $500 to help the team lose a series of games that would affect the outcome of the pennant race. Sand turned them down and reported them both. Dolan spent 7 years as a player before becoming a coach. His batting average was .252 across 1,187 at-bats. He died in 1958 at the age of 68. O'Connell only spent 2 years playing professionally, notching a .270 batting average and a little over 300 at-bats. He died in 1976 at the age of 75 in Bakersfield, California. William D. Cox was a lumber entrepreneur. He owned the Philadelphia Phillies for just 276 days before becoming the first non-player to ever be banned from baseball. The team's manager, Bucky Harris, said he heard Cox's secretary asking about betting odds and asked her if Cox was gambling on games. According to Harris, she said it was common knowledge within the Phillies that he was. Cox eventually admitted making the bets, but said he didn't know it was against the rules to do so. He died in 1989 at 79 years of age. And before we go on to, again, a re-release of the lifetime and filming locations of the life of Shoeless Joe that we did a few years ago, I want to talk about the man himself. He was one of 8 members of the Black Sox that were banned. His level of participation has been disputed mightily. Now, MLB, even though he has been reinstated, they do not shy away from saying that the commissioner at the time, that the Black Sox scandal actually was the purpose of having the first ever MLB commissioner. The commissioner at the time had ample evidence to suggest that he at least knew what was going on. Jackson hit .375 in the World Series. But at a minimum, again, he knew the plans of what was going on and he didn't report it. He initially admitted to a grand jury that he received $5,000 from gamblers as part of the fix. But he later said he never made those comments, and honestly, I don't believe he did. He maintained that he never intentionally played poorly. The Chicago jury acquitted the players in 1921, but Shoeless Joe, along with his alleged co-conspirators, received lifetime bans from professional baseball. The Hall of Fame would open in 1936, and as Rob Manfred actually said in his letter to Pete Rose's attorney, there was no rule preventing permanently ineligible players from consideration. Because of that loophole, Jackson's name did come up as part of the vote of the 36 inaugural class, and again in 1946. He was denied both times, and he passed away in 1951. Joseph Jefferson Jackson, or as he's better known to most people, Shoeless Joe Jackson. One of the greatest baseball players of all time, maybe the greatest player of all time. His career cut short in his prime when he was coming into his own. Ty Cobb has said he was the best pure hitter he had ever seen. Babe Ruth would many times across many years of interviews talk about how he had patterned his own style after Joe Jackson. Shoeless Joe's .356 lifetime batting average was third overall in baseball for years, and only recently slipped to number 4 after a readjustment following the rightful inclusion of statistics from the Negro Leagues. In fact, Shoeless Joe, in the season following the Black Sox scandal, batted over .380. That very scandal that would see Joe and 7 of his Chicago White Sox teammates be banished for baseball for throwing the World Series against the Cincinnati Reds, despite the fact that his teammates said he was at no of the meetings where they agreed to take cash payments to throw the games. He had more hits than any other player in the World Series, committed no fielding errors, and his supposed confession was coerced from a team lawyer, with the mostly illiterate Shoeless Joe not knowing what he had signed. We've seen him portrayed in movies, on television, even in video games. Some 70 years after his death, and more than 100 years after his banishment from baseball, our fascination with Shoeless Joe Jackson, if anything, it grows. I'm in Greenville, South Carolina, the home of Shoeless Joe, to answer the question, what happened to Shoeless Joe after baseball, and to visit the many sites here that commemorate this amazing baseball player who had an amazing personal story, who proved that through grit and determination that you can accomplish anything. The man that we would later come to know as Shoeless Joe Jackson came from very humble beginnings. Born in 1895, the oldest son of a sharecropper father, they would move around small towns in South Carolina before settling in the community of Brandon on the outskirts of Greenville, South Carolina. And at a young age of 6 or 7, he would actually go to work in the textile mill. At the age of 8, he would have a severe bout of measles that would nearly kill him, paralyzed, and his mother would nurse him back to health over a 2-month period. An education, unfortunately, was not something that would be afforded for Joseph. What he would instead do is work 12-hour shifts at the mill at a very young age. But in the year 1900, at the age of 13, his mother would be approached by the mill operators to have Joe play on the company baseball team. Mill teams were huge at this point, and in fact, it would be a paying gig. Joe would be the youngest player on the team, but would earn the equivalent of $78 in today's money per game. Originally used as a pitcher, he would actually break a player's arm with one of his pitches, and people refused to bat against him. he would move to an offensive position, and it would change his life. This is the Shoeless Joe Jackson Memorial Park in Greenville. It is the very same park that the mill workers would play on. And the most famous to play here was, of course, Shoeless Joe himself. He would be paid for this pastime. He would actually play for quite a number of mills, going around to find the team that would pay him the most money. Mill baseball teams, mill sports teams were highly prized by the mill operators. It kept an enthusiastic employee base. It gave them an outlet. It kept them excited about their jobs. Even in baseball, his lack of education and the fact that he was illiterate would seemingly go with Joe from place to place. He would wait for his teammates to order something in a restaurant and then just copy something that they had said instead of having somebody read him the menu, for example. But here on the diamond, he could escape that. Here on the field, he was unparalleled. In the early 1900s, Joe was becoming quite the local celebrity. In fact, a fan had given him a handcrafted baseball bat, Black Betsy. It was made of hickory and it was dyed black with tobacco juice. It would follow him through into the minor leagues where people would say, "Go get Black Betsy," to finish off a team. By 1905, Joe would be playing semi-professional baseball with the Greenville Spinners, who also boast Tommy Lasorda as an alumnus, and his contract would be purchased by the Philadelphia Athletics. Now, the numbers differ. Some say $323 all the way up to $900, so somewhere between $10,000 and $25,000 in today's money was paid by the Athletics for his contract, and he was in the show, the Major Leagues. And shortly thereafter, he would marry the love of his life, Catherine Wynn. And as you can see here, Joe was always dressed up. In fact, he dressed up throughout the rest of his life. He was always wanting to live down that pesky nickname. And speaking of which, so we can't go any further without addressing perhaps the most famous thing about Shoeless Joe. The fact that he got the nickname Shoeless Joe. How did it happen? Did he just not wear shoes? Well, of course not. There was one game, though. He had been wearing some ill-fitted new cleats that had left blisters on his feet, so by the next day, Joe was hobbling and just didn't think he was going to be able to play. Well, his manager on the Greenville Spinners really needed him, and so they essentially gave him permission to go to the plate in his stocking feet. And it just so happened that Joe would get a triple, something he did a lot of. A fan would notice him running for third, and he would say, "You shoeless son of a gun, you." And the name stuck. And even though Joe hated it, and he did, he felt that it portrayed him in a certain light, almost made him seem like a country bumpkin. It also led to quite a few endorsements, so it can't be all bad. And now we're outside of Fluor Field, where the Greenville Drive play. They are a high A affiliate of the Boston Red Sox. In fact, this is a minor league park version of the Boston Stadium. They even have their own green monster on a smaller scale. And right out in front of the Drive Stadium, we have a great statue of Shoeless Joe that I wanted to show you. And you will find that it does have shoes on. But a great representation and a great way to honor Joe. So the next location that we're going to is not too far. It's right beside of the stadium. I love the fact that fans can come out of the stadium and go over and find out more about Shoeless Joe Jackson. It's not always been here. It was about 3 miles away. It is the final home that Joe and his wife, Catherine, lived in Greenville, and it is now a museum. So let's take a look at it in present day. And right here in the thick of things, next to major construction and a baseball stadium on the other side of the street, is this modest home of the Jacksons that they would purchase in 1940, and Joe would be here until his death in 1951. And we'll get into more of what Joe did after baseball as we tour inside the home. That is now a great museum, and it is free to the public. They do ask for a donation if you feel so moved. I did, and I encourage anybody that goes, please make sure you're buying something from the souvenir shop and you're giving a kind donation. The museum is on the national list of historic places, and the owners are doing a fantastic job. The owners and curators are doing a fantastic job preserving this history for future generations. Again, some 100 years past when he was actually banished from baseball, and we're still celebrating his accomplishments. But don't hit anybody with it.
Well, no, I wasn't planning to do it.
Shoeless Joe, Ty Cobb. One of the great things about baseball bats is that when you'll see baseball players actually talk amongst themselves about what's their preferred bat, what's the preferred weight. Tony Gwynn would talk about getting to talk to Ted Williams and really get a feel for his bat, and they were pretty amazed at the bat, for instance, that Babe Ruth had. Just a love affair with baseball. How can you not love baseball? Some of the film version autographs of Shoeless Joe: Ray Liotta up top, D.B. Sweeney from 8 Men Out. Some more memorabilia, the Say It Ain't So Joe, which was what a kid supposedly said to Shoeless Joe as he came out of the courtroom, and he said, "I'm afraid it is, son." Well, that exchange never happened, but it has definitely made it into the lexicon of pop culture. Great souvenir shop in front, all the customary things you would think, the postcards, magnets, great t-shirts. Now, this is something that I really fanboyed out on, the actual uniform of Joe Jackson. Pretty amazing.
Was really a classy guy, and he was very well educated. He wanted his players to be very well educated, preferably with college degree. And he'd be holding the menu upside down because he'd deliver it. I'm sure there was probably some hazing involved.
The museum also boasts a very impressive baseball library, over 5,000 books about baseball. I could be in here a long time. And we see the marriage photo above the mantle here in the living room. I think that's a cool fireplace. Some of the original furniture. And we have some magazines kind of representing the time frames that they lived in this home. This was their final home from 1940 through his death in 51, as I mentioned earlier. We've got lots of memorabilia from his playing days. After he left baseball, he played under assumed names all throughout semi-pro baseball for several more years, until in 1923, he and his wife opened up a very successful dry cleaning business in Savannah, Georgia. They would have to come back to Greenville because of family illness, and they would stay in Greenville for the rest of his and her life. And once they got back to Greenville, he actually initially opened up a barbecue restaurant and then later opened up a liquor store, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Joe played for the Athletics. He played for the Naps, which would later become the Indians, until 1915. Then he was traded to the Chicago White Sox. And the White Sox, of course, are how most people know him. It's where he won the World Series, also where a World Series was purportedly thrown, which we've already discussed. But a very good career, and again, really in his prime. And some items from Comiskey. There was a Comiskey Park seat. You get an idea of what his locker looked like. I love this image here, him with Babe Ruth discussing hitting. Really like this item here, kind of dispelling a lot of the myths around the Black Sox scandal. This is online, so you can see it. One of those in particular, it talks about the lack of really a substantive investigation, the fact that a jury found the players not guilty and that the commissioner of baseball didn't care. Kennesaw Mountain Landis, he didn't care. And just a modest kitchen Mrs. Jackson kept. She loved to entertain guests, and a lot of the original items still in the home. Each generation seemingly wants Major League Baseball to right this wrong, and each subsequent commissioner just continues to kick the can further and further down the line. But we hope one day that he will be reinstated and in the Hall of Fame where he belongs. After initially opening up the barbecue restaurant, Joe would open up a liquor store, and he would run that for the rest of his life. It was down here on Pendleton Street in Greenville. It's still here. It is a graphic design custom t-shirt shop now, and they have this plaque denoting that it was Shoeless Joe Jackson's liquor store. They didn't always have a plaque here, so it's really cool to see them call that out and for it to be another stop as you're checking out the sites. So there's a famous story, of course. Legendary baseball player Ty Cobb wanted to stop by the liquor store. He was in town. He wanted to visit with his friend. He went in, got some alcohol, went to pay for it, and finally just blurted out, "Well, Joe, do you not know who I am?" And he said, "Well, of course I know who you are, Ty. I just wasn't sure that you wanted to know me." And that's kind of where Joe fell towards the end of his life, and after his playing days had ended, and he didn't know how many wanted to be associated with him, and most did. Our final stop is Shoeless Joe Jackson's final stop. Woodlawn Cemetery in Greenville, South Carolina, where he and his wife are buried. Now, this is the center tower in the cemetery. You can't miss it. And Joe is buried not far from there. He is in Section V, and we will show you his grave now. You can't miss it as you're moving around in Section V, because you see that it is adorned with coins, adorned with baseball memorabilia. For going on 7 decades now, fans have been bringing baseballs, shoes, baseball bats to the grave of a legend. Now, Joe had several heart attacks, and it actually was a heart attack that took him in 1951. He was beloved in Greenville, and he loved this state. He loved South Carolina. He loved the children of the community and would give to them quite a bit, especially during the holidays. And it is my hope that on this baseball diamond, on the Shoeless Joe Jackson Memorial Park, that the next Joe Jackson may come up, may feel the baseball go off the bat, stretch a double into a triple, and maybe, just maybe, need to come out of his shoes, and a legend might be born. Thanks for watching, everybody. And a little bit of bonus footage for you. Now, there are very few Shoeless Joe Jackson autographs that exist that aren't something official, a contract, a check. If you see autographs such as this one right here, typically it was done by his wife, who, as we talked about the fact that Joe was virtually illiterate and relied on his family to do most of those things, to sign the autograph requests that he would get. Pawn Stars, for instance, bought a fake autograph. So the real autographs that exist of Shoeless Joe carry a significant premium. And a Black Betsy, an original Black Betsy bat, recently sold at auction. It was given by Mrs. Jackson to a family friend. Brought more than $600,000. So the mystique surrounding this legend has really never been stronger. So for real this time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much for watching that section, folks, which I widely believe to be the finest video that me and Lori have ever done. And if you haven't seen it before, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that the reinstatement leads to the enshrinement of Shoeless Joe and Pete Rose. I think it's the right thing to do for their skill. And I think the penance has been paid. I think it's now time to honor them for what they meant to the game of baseball. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Have a great day.